Welcome to Let the Quran Speak. When we speak about the people of Lot, one sin comes to mind. But the Quran actually mentions 3, and one of them might surprise you. We're going to be looking at that now as part of our misunderstood Quranic verses. We're looking at chapter 29, verse 29. And with me is Dr. Shabir. Dr. Shabir, I want to give you a rundown of the verse itself in English. So here are 2 different translations. Must you indeed approach men with lust and thus cut across the way of nature? And must you commit these shameful deeds in your open assemblies? But his people's only answer was, bring down upon us God's chastisement, if thou art a man of truth. That's a Muhammad Asad translation. And here is another translation by Yusuf Ali. Do you indeed approach men and cut off the highway, and practice wickedness even in your own counsels? But his people gave no answer but this. They said, bring us the wrath of Allah if thou tellest the truth. So I guess in Yusuf Ali's translation, we see some other crimes, like cutting off the highway and practicing wickedness, right? So tell us about that, Dr. Shabir. I don't know if you want to first reference the Arabic itself.
Yeah. So it's important to look at the Arabic here because the Arabic has the conjunction wa in Arabic, which means simply and it occurs like 3 times. So it says, or at least 2 times. So let's count them. So Lot says to his people, "Atatuna rijala wa taqtauna sabil wa ta'tuna fi nadikumul munkar." So there are two conjunctions that conjoin 3 conjuncts, right? So we have 3 things that obviously Lot is asking them, are you doing all of these 3 things? You approach men, you cut off the path, and you do wicked things in your assemblies. فَمَا كَانَ جَوَابَ قَوْمِهِ إِلَّا أَنْ قَالُوا ائْتِنَا بِعَذَابِ اللَّهِ إِنْ كُنْتَ مِنَ الصَّادِقِينَ. So their only reply was, bring on us the punishment from God if what you're saying is true. Like if you're a true preacher, just bring us the punishment from God. So there are 3 separate things which are mentioned, and you can say that there's some overlap. Maybe the first thing they did, they're doing it in the assembly as well, and so there are three things. But there are
2 things potentially.
Well, there are 3 things, but they're doing the one in addition to other things because it says munkar. Munkar could be like wide. This is some objectionable things. So you are doing objectionable things. Maybe the first objectionable thing is included among the other objectionable things, and maybe they do that in the assemblies as well. But notice that they couldn't do the second thing in the assembly, which is like cutting off the highway, because cutting off the highway is different from the assembly and their nadis, their clubs, right? Their nawadi. Muhammad Asad's translation, on the other hand, gives a rendering and that conflates at least 2 of the items in a way that seems totally unnecessary. Let's see how that has happened and then think about why it happens. So he has it that you're approaching men and thereby cutting off the path, meaning, as the classical commentators tend to say, the path to having children. Instead of going to your wives, you are approaching other men, fulfilling your desires that way. And therefore, you're cutting off the natural way, the natural path through which children would have been born.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And then you're doing the same thing in your assemblies. So it's all getting conflated into almost like one real terrible action that is being done. And by doing it this way, the classical commentators have tended to minimize the other crimes so that the one crime stands out. Because we have to think about why God brings this exemplary punishment on these people. It must be something really terrible that they did, and so the commentators tended to put the entire weight on that one sort of action in order to justify the punishment. Without realizing fully enough that it's a combination of all of these things. We're not minimizing any one of these things below what the Quran has placed it at, but at the same time, we should not over-magnify one of these things over what the Quran has placed it at. And their attempts to give this full weight on that first mention, the first item mentioned, might be seen when they try to explain what people have been doing. What is this munkar that I said could include many things that they're doing in their assemblies? Classical commentators on the Quran surprisingly mention trivial things like putting henna on their fingers, or they mention even farting and sometimes even defecating. So imagine people defecating in their clubs, okay, so where do they get all of this from? So it seems that they're trying to come up with things which could have been done wrong, but not such heinous things to deflect from what they consider to be the grossness of the first item.
Homosexuality.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's one thing to be observed. The other thing to be noted here is that the cutting off of the tariq, or qatu sabil, or qatu tariq, this is one of the greatest crimes in the Islamic penal system. Very severe punishments are mentioned for this in the Quran. Highway robbers and so on, who are there attacking and raping and pillaging, and plundering and making it impossible for people to go about safely on their paths. One can say that when we add all of these things up together, the punishment was visited on the people of Lot. Because of all of their crimes, including this one, which is a heinous crime, right? It's a capital offense in the Islamic penal system. And what is interesting to note is that, as mentioned by Muqatil bin Sulaiman in his commentary, one of the earliest commentaries that we have, in fact, the earliest commentary that is reliably attributed to its author, who died around the middle of the 2nd century, about 150 of the Hijrah. That means about 140 years, 139 years after the death of our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So he was writing very early. And he said that the people of Lot used to do this only to strangers. So it wasn't the kind of consensual sorts of relationships that we're talking about today generally in public discourse. So they were doing this to strangers. So what might they do? Other commentators explain this further by saying, they would be on a lookout point, and as travelers are going by, they would cast pebbles on them. They would pelt them. And the one who scored a hit, he had the first right to violate that person sexually. So they were obviously, having fun, playing games like this, and violating the travelers.
So who said this, Dr. Shabir?
This is mentioned in many of the classical commentators, like Tabari, for example, that they did this. So what they were doing then obviously would be classified today as homosexual rape. And we've seen in other passages of the Quran that we've already discussed, from Surah 7, from Surah 15, for example, that eventually they wanted to do the same thing with the guests of Lut alayhi salam, because obviously these are travelers, right? They came in as strangers, angels in human disguise, but to the locals, they look like travelers, and open targets for them for their lustful and criminal behavior. So it's for all of these things combined, but we should not even stop there, because many of the commentators acknowledge what is so obvious in the verse, that in the end they said, bring upon us the punishment of God if you're a true preacher from God. So that means they denied the prophet of God, and we know elsewhere in the Quran that denying the prophet of God is denying God, and God visits his punishment upon the deniers. Though in the story of Lot, it is not so clearly mentioned that he was one of the preachers of monotheism, it's taken for granted by the classical commentators that he, along with other prophets, naturally preached monotheism. And if the people had accepted his preaching of monotheism, it would have been a whole different ballgame. But the fact is that they denied even his monotheistic preaching. So all of this together would explain why the punishment came upon the people of Lot. It's not just for one thing, but it's the combination. They're denying his preaching of monotheism. They're denying him as a prophet. They're eventually, calling down upon themselves the punishment from God in a very arrogant and boastful manner. Their attack or their intended attack on the guests of the prophet of God, which is ultimate defiance of the prophet of God, because it's one thing that they were attacking other travelers. Now they're attacking the travelers who are the guests of the Prophet of God. And of course, they're attacking other travelers. That's bad enough. And whatever other evils they were doing in their assemblies. So it shows that there is a conglomeration of evils for which God eventually punished them.
I guess this is a lesson to us, Dr. Shabir, that we shouldn't oversimplify the story.
True.
Thank you for that, Dr. Shabir.
You're welcome.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Muslim Media Hub, the new home of Let the Quran Speak.
Here we spread positivity and good. We help people experience the beauty of Islam and help them appreciate and understand Muslims.
This beautiful building we purchased at cost $2.3 million.
Yeah, we've already raised a third of that money, and with your help, inshallah, we can pay off the rest.
So we're looking for people who can give $1,000 each. If you can be part of the select group, that's amazing.
Otherwise, just please give whatever you can. Every dollar counts.
It's our collective responsibility to share the message of Islam with our fellow human beings. Please help us continue this good work.
It's a sadaqah jariyah, something that will continue to be a benefit to the Muslim community long after Safiya and I are gone.
Please support our work at muslimmediahub.com.
Your support is zakat eligible and tax deductible.
May Allah bless you and your loved ones today and always. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.